Okay, so I'm here with Jake Knapp. Come on! We just talked about this. I'm here with Jake Knapp, the most famous designer in the entire planet, according to him. Jake is the author of Sprint. Actually, let's explain what a book is.
It's a lot of sheets of paper.
Okay.
They're glued together.
That's most of my questions already gone.
Well, that's a wrap.
I'm Jake. I'm a designer, although it's been a while since I actually did any real design on products.
Alright guys, so here's the deal. We kind of messed up the sound on this video.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The content is still great, but you're going to hear every so often some sort of You should still watch this video, even though it's actually really good sound. It's actually perfect.
The sound was amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Never mind this.
I'm really into process, how things get done, and making good use of time. That's kind of became my sort of mission in life, is making good use of time, my own time and other people's time. And so I came up with this process called a design sprint, built on a lot of ideas that have been out there, and I tried to formalize it into a recipe that could be run over and over again. Started doing that at Google, doing it at did it at Google Ventures about 5 years with a bunch of different startups, and now a lot of folks are doing it, which is pretty cool. Kind of by accident. I mean, I was always really into design, but didn't realize it. When I was a kid, I was into computers, and we had the Apple computer with like the black screen and green text on it. And anyway, as soon as I got a hold of something where I could make a game on the computer, I was all into that. I used HyperCard, used Photoshop in high school, and in college I got an internship at Oakley, the sunglasses company, and I was supposed to be writing copy there, but they needed somebody to make animated GIFs, and I knew how to do that.
That's your thing.
So I was like, I'll do that, and so I ended up working with the web team, and then I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like all this other stuff that I like, and so I kind of learned on the job. Well, I had been exposed to a workshop that I think came from IDEO. He brought this process in, and there was a lot of really cool things about it. And then I'd seen pieces of other things that teams were doing that were really interesting. hackathons, or just even the way some teams ran their stand-ups at Google. They were interesting. But I hadn't seen something that took all of that, put it together into like the full cycle of what you need to do to make progress on a design. So at some point, kind of frustrated with the pace of my own design work, and oftentimes my own procrastination, or the sort of random nature of the way a week was spent. I have a meeting about this topic and a meeting about that topic, all these context switches, bringing people in at the wrong time, and things just kind of sometimes slogging on for too long. I thought, I wonder if you could apply that to a bigger time scale, and a week seemed reasonable. I thought a design sprint, that word would help people at Google. It was a very engineering driven culture. I thought it would make design sound appealing to them because it was fast. Well, I think they're the same. I mean, I think that design I think that design thinking and also like the lean startup are two excellent philosophies, but they're not necessarily easy to apply. It's not necessarily easy to know how you put that into practice. And the design sprint takes, I think, the essence of those philosophies, and it says, look, here's a recipe for how you do that. There's more to it than that. There are more things in the sprint that have to do with group dynamics, the way people make decisions, even like kind of behavioral science and stuff. But a lot of it is taking that idea that often is best done by an agency, and showing any team, like, here's a practical way to do it really fast, and put it into practice. So I don't think of them as competing in any way, or really even different. It's just it's an application of it. I think the reason why design sprints have worked well is because I was in this really unique situation, and together with my colleagues at Google Ventures, we got to work with all these different companies. We really just want to introduce them to a process that will help them learn quickly, because as investors, we wanted them to be successful. We wanted them to be able to take a bunch of risks without risking too much on those, and be able to find that product market fit. Well, even if you don't read it, you should buy it. That's
you
the
should
key,
buy it.
because it makes a great.
You should buy
it's a
at
lovely
least 10
at least
copies.
10. Yeah, because you want to build a little like a house.
I think it's in the book
if you have
you
any
say
action
that the more
figures, it's a
copies
great.
you buy, the better the process.
It's a
will get.
direct correlation
Yeah.
to its numbers. Yeah, but the big idea in the book is to build and test a prototype in 5 days. And I think, and the idea in the book is if you have a recipe for doing that, you and your team can focus on solving the problem and not have to worry about figuring out how to get there. Ideally as early on in the process of doing something big and risky as possible, but I think any time where you think that you're arguing with each other, you're saying like, I'm not sure we should do it this way, we should do it that way, and you're saying, I think people will do this, I think people will do that. You're embarking on something that's going to take you weeks or months or longer and it's expensive. That's a great time to try doing a sprint because you see a huge advance in the clarity of the idea and your confidence that you're on the right course. Yeah, I originally thought it would only work for digital products when we started doing it, and then at Google Ventures we wanted to try it with different kinds of companies because we were invested in different kinds of companies, and thus far it has proved that it works with pretty much anything. The key is that every kind of every kind of problem you might try to solve has some point where a human touches the thing, right? Like if it's a sales process, there's a moment when that salesperson talks to a client or potential customer. If it's a decision-making process inside a company, there's a moment when there's a meeting that happens and people follow that process. And all those things are prototypable moments. So in the sprint, if you just think, where's the key opportunity or risk for us in implementing this new thing, and instead of deciding what the right way to do it is and then totally committing to it forever, we're going to prototype it and test it out. Then all the sprint stuff works. The two biggest, most common mistakes are not involving the decision maker at all, so not thinking who's going to decide what should ultimately happen and just going on it. And the other really common mistake is cutting it short, so stopping before you've prototyped or before you've tested. Usually that's, the first thing people say is like, well, it's great that you can do it in 4 or 5 days, but what if you could do it in 2 or 3? And then in my experience in sprints, often at the end of doing the sketches, making the decisions, you think, oh, this is a great idea, maybe we should just go build it. And then when you prototype it and put it in front of people, you recognize all the flaws. And usually in your first sprint, there's a lot of flaws, which is great. You've learned that early. But if you don't learn that early, you'll go ahead and build that thing and then you're gonna be really sorry when it gets out in the wild. The sprint will work even with an inexperienced moderator. If somebody follows the steps, it's so detailed. In the book, there's like a 15-page checklist. Like it really takes you through every part of the process, and it's very much a how-to guide. And I've heard a lot of stories from folks who ran a sprint for the first time and it worked. But when you have an experienced moderator, there are all kinds of good things that happen, and I think one of those is it takes the burden off of the team itself. And you've got somebody who can come in there and manage it. You don't have to wonder so much about whether different parts are going to work. So there's that confidence level, and that's kind of level 2 of things. And then level 3 is being able to help people kind of move through things more quickly, being able to help people figure out how to make a map or make the right decisions more quickly. And then I think what you really get to like at a high level with a moderator, when someone who's worked on a lot of different products, when they have a sense of product strategy and business strategy and can help the team see some of the opportunities along the way, that's, then the sprint becomes super powerful.
Exact number.
The exact number is 24% of the time.
Exactly.
I think a lot of times what happens with the first sprint is you learn how wrong you were about some big assumptions, and that sounds like it would be super depressing, but it's usually kind of exciting. It usually seems like, okay, but now having seen our thing like exposed to the real world, the sort of the negative space becomes clear. You're like, the real opportunity is here. If we shift like this, it's going to make much more sense to people. So it's often in that follow-up week, maybe I'm doing a follow-up sort of a partial sprint to finish, like revise the prototype, test it again. That's when things often take off. 23% is probably a little low. I think a lot of times there's definitely components in almost every prototype that are good and strong, even on the first sprint. But it's rare that the first sprint is completely right. It's a good question, and I will be honest, I'm not opinionated about that. I think different companies have different ways that they build products, that they do their day-to-day work. And I don't think it's reasonable to ask people to not only try this design sprint, this new way of working, but also change the way you do everything. And I don't think it's necessary. After a sprint, 2 sprints, 3 sprints, whenever the team gets to the point that they have confidence that this is a good direction, this is something we should build, then having that confidence will make whatever way you build things go better. Because you're not going to have that situation where you're at each other's throats 3 months later because you're like, oh, I just totally disagree on like this fundamental thing about this. You have that shared confidence from the beginning, and it just makes everything go better. So if it's, if it's agile, even if it's like kind of waterfall, like, we think of that as like terrible, but if you start with a really strong idea, you make that prototype robust, and then you say, great, let's go execute on it, even if it's going to take us a while, that can be okay. Yeah, a good rule of thumb is quarterly. And that doesn't fit.
One sprint quarterly, or?
Maybe like a sprint with the follow-on kind of like, let's fix all the stuff that we found was wrong in the first one. By pleading, usually. Just pleading, yeah. Just
beg them.
Would you please try this? The biggest thing that usually sells people on sprints, if they're skeptical, is the idea that we're going to have a realistic prototype very quickly. For skeptics, the value of testing it is often abstract until they see it. It's hard to know that showing it to especially a small number of customers, because people have questions about, well, why would you use 5? And of course there's answers to that. But I think that the other way that I'll often suggest people sell it is let's do this as an experiment. To be very candid about the reasons why you're running the sprint in the first place, which is usually you feel like we're moving too slow. You feel like we might be missing a big opportunity here, or we're getting frustrated arguing with each other, or the way we're spending our time isn't efficient. Whatever it might be, to be really candid about that to the other people on the team or the leaders or whoever, and say like, this seems like a worthy experiment for us to run. It's working for lots of other teams and lots of other contexts, and I think we should give it a try. So I think that's a good way to start. Actually, I have not heard anyone say, well, we ran the sprint and it was a huge waste of time. Yeah, it's kind of weird, actually. I mean, it's almost fishy, because there have been so many of them run by this point. I feel like people would be really angry and would talk about it if it didn't work, and I haven't heard that. So I don't know. That sounds like a weak answer.
So that's something that's actually interesting, right? Because the results of the user tests at the end, for sure, they give you kind of a clear overview, but is there like a danger that it's subjective?
There is. I mean, it gives you a good idea of why people might understand or not understand, which is usually the biggest gap that people have with their products. But what you don't have is that quantitative, it's out there, like we have this like sort of statistical evidence that it works.
What do you think about that?
I think that because the why is so hard to get, and because you can get the why really fast if you operate in this way, whereas it's hard to take a big risky bet and then get like quantitative data about that fast. So I think it's okay, but you are missing part of the picture. I mean, quantitative data is super important. I didn't work at Google for 10 years without having that hammered into my head, and I totally believe it. You don't want to go for quantitative data so fast that you handcuff yourself from taking risks and trying like multiple different things. And that's what most companies get stuck. They're like, it's quantitative data or nothing, and then you're very limited in what you can try.
My business is my pleasure.
Okay, we can just leave it there, I think. That's it.
Okay.
Jake, thanks a lot for coming out here in your lovely neighborhood in San Francisco. This is actually Jake's house we're sitting in right now.
Yeah. This is not even outside the house.
No, this is indoors. This is being filmed indoors right now.
This is the bathroom.
This is just the toilet. You should see the other toilet. Now, but thanks a lot for taking the time out to do this interview. I think everyone watching is going to be super happy with it. And
even if they're not.
Even if they're not, fuck them. Fuck you guys. You know what? Is that what you were going to say?
No.